and welcome to Scott's Adventures. I'm sitting inside the Winnebago Solus NPF edition, and this episode we're going to talk about dislikes. Unfortunately, there are a few things that we don't really like about the van. Mostly we love it, but there are a few just little quirks that we found out over the time. We've had this van about 2 years, so it's a good time to do a long-term test, and we'll tell you all about the little quirks and things about it. So this vehicle says Ram on the front. It's supposed to be a Ram ProMaster 1500 and it was taken Winnebago, and they made it into the Solus and NPF edition, and that's all great. We traveled to Iceland and we rented a van, and it was a Fiat, and we picked up the van, and I looked at it from the outside, and it looked really, really similar to our van at home. Then I walked inside and I go, wait a minute, this is exactly the same as our van. Everything was laid out perfectly except for it had two beds in the back instead of just one. It was kind of funny because he said, this is crazy. This is exactly like our van at home. What conclusion I came to is our van at home is not a Ram, it's a Fiat. What Stellantis did is it took the Fiat van and they slapped the Ram badge on it, and they said, here you go, this is it. And why we know that is because it has a lot of little quirks that you wouldn't run into unless it was actually a European version Fiat branded with a Ram badge on it. So some of the funny things that you do when you're in the adaptive cruise, it will have the speed limit in miles per hour because I changed that in the computer, but the speed limit that you're going or that you're set to will be in kilometers. So I set the adaptive cruise. It tells me I'm at 110 kilometers an hour, and the speed limit is 65 miles per hour. So now I have to do math to say, well, am I over the 65 miles an hour more than 110 kilometers an hour? So you're like, well, why doesn't it just, if I say miles per hour in the computer, why doesn't everything change? Well, it has these holdovers from the European version. It's kind of like, it kind of supports miles per hour, but not really. So another thing you do is it has a digital readout, and I'll show you a picture of that here, of the miles per hour that you can change into kilometers per hour or miles per hour. So it comes up kilometers per hour. You go, oh, I don't like that. You change. It says, oh, just hit enter if you want to change it to miles per hour. Yes, please. And then you're in miles per hour. You're like, great. Then you go over and you check your fuel gauge or your tire pressure, and you go back to your speed. It reverts back to kilometers per hour, and you have to reset it again every single time. There's no way to set like a global of I want everything to be in miles per hour. So we're almost in the process of like throwing in the towel and just going, okay, we're going to do kilometers per hour because that's what this van wants to do. So we kind of went away from the digital readout and just went to the gauge to figure out our speed. And then the adaptive cruise is in two different measurement systems. You just got to deal with it. So that's about the only thing there. We did have a problem with this window leaked a little bit. I put a little bit of sealer over it. Not a big deal. Up here in the solar panels, we had it outside in our driveway for like a year and a half before I finally bought this cover for it. And it was really, the sun was really harsh on the, I could tell, like the paint was kind of fading a little bit already, even after a year and a half. I noticed that like the fiberglass parts of the pop-up don't fare as good as the painted parts of the van. And so then we had a little issue with the solar panel has these black like sealer things around the edge, and one was peeling off, so I kind of had to glue it back down. I like the distance to empty. That's what we usually run on, is when we're cruising along, it will show you your instant fuel economy and your distance to empty. And so you can, as you're cruising along, and you can kind of say, okay, I have 50 miles to go. let's go to this, gas station 30 miles up ahead. And so what happens is when you get down to be like about 40 miles of range left, it blanks out the range. So all of a sudden, it's like it just blanks. So when you get down to the fuel being low, when you need to really look at how much I have left and how much distance I have left, it blanks it out and it doesn't tell you. So it's like when you need it the most, it decides not to do that. So there's kind of little irritating things like that that sort of irritate you. But for the most part, we really enjoyed this van, and maybe they'll work out some of these quirks here and there. But that's about all that we have as far as our dislikes. So put any comments you have down in the comments there, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Scout's Garage. Bye bye. So one of the other things when we were in Iceland and we rented the Fiat van, we would fill it up with water, and by the time we got to our next stop, the water was completely empty. This is the water in the freshwater system, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. And so we tried a bunch of different things, and finally, I lifted up this seat here, and there were some valves down there, and I realized that the valve was open to drain the fresh water. And so we closed that, we drained the fresh water, and everything was fine. I thought, okay, well, that was fine. I think what somebody did is drained it, and they turned it in, and then nobody turned it closed. Bit of a hassle, but not that big of a deal. And what I've been doing on our van is when I wanted to drain the fresh water is I had just been, turning on the faucets and letting the pump, pump the water out, either the shower or the sink or something like that. And it seemed like that was a lot of stress on the pump, and I wasn't sure that we really got all the water out. So I was like, if this van is exactly like ours, then when I got home, I lifted up this seat and looked down in there, and sure enough, the valve was this exact same valve was down there to drain the fresh water as the van that we rented in Iceland. And so I was like, yeah, this is definitely a Fiat, not a Ram. And so I'm able to do that. What I typically do is drive around the block a couple of times to slosh I usually have like 5 gallons of water in there, slosh it around, and then open up that valve and drive around so you can kind of drain all the water in before you fill it back up. But that was something that we learned from our Fiat van in Iceland.